Hello there, weary traveler. Seeking information on goblins, I see. Well, fear not. Welcome to the Bardic INNspiration.
We're going to talk about goblins today. As you can tell, we're pretty joyous about that. What do we know about goblins? You just mentioned Maglubiet. Who is that?
Well, Maglubiet is that all-powerful, almighty one. He's kind of that conquered deity. He took a bunch of other deities of other races, took them all under his command, and made them all goblinkin.
Gotcha.
So you got your goblins, your bugbears, your hobgoblins, and they all worship their own individual gods.
Oh.
And so
Yeah.
Maglubiet, in a essentially like a gods like war, came in, took control of all of these other deities, and said, "You now serve me." And he took all these different races and made them all. So goblins, hobgoblins, and bugbears were separate as elves, dwarves, and humans.
Yeah.
But under this new command of Maglubiet, he took all of them and made them goblinkin.
No, this is just a question of the fact since Maglubiet kind of brought them all together, were they called something different?
Depends on what. I mean, there's different editions. There's before even Maglubiet and D&D.
Mm-hmm.
Goblins have been around since first edition, since J.R. Tolkien and The Hobbit and stuff. They were called orcs then as well. They've been around since Irish mythos? Or?
Yeah, the Middle Ages.
Okay,
So
so
they
even
were
before
known
that.
as cantankerous, little conniving creatures that would go into homes and steal things. So
The Celtic,
Mm-hmm.
Celtic
Yeah.
pantheon and all that stuff.
Okay.
yeah. So you said that there were other deities. What kind of deities they ruled before Maglubiet
So,
came in?
goblins and hobgoblins kind of had one they have called the peacekeepers, Bardic. Under his worship, it was kind of that self-unity, the discipline.
So they were essentially peaceful at one point, under his rule at least.
It's yes and no. It's more of a you kind of get that individual tribe. We're not going to go out and start raiding other people. We stay within our own community, kind
Gotcha.
of peace.
Okay.
But then it was also things like discipline and keeping people in line kind of thing.
Right,
yeah.
So you
alignment,
follow
like
the
it-
rules and everything.
Sure.
Very
So
militaristic.
they stay
piece.
very, like, loyal in a sense.
All right.
Yeah, and then goblins had their own, and kind of going along with that mythos. Kurgor Bayag, he's the overseer. He was the Maglubiet before Maglubiet
That
for
makes sense.
goblins. He was also a very trickster kind of goblin. He is, and because of him,
Why we
Nilbogs were created, which.
Oh.
Yeah, his trickster after Maglubiet came over and
I
controlled.
blame him for
He
everything.
still wants his own power, so he kind of devised a new trick and created this new, not really a race, more of a spirit, and he kind of embodied it into goblins. And so, then there's Namog Gaiaya, the general, and anyone who wanted to be a leader in the Hobgon, they worshipped him with it. And Maglubiet came over, and some still worship this one, but Maglubiet is kind of worship all three in a sense. They're very hobgoblins. Surprisingly, are
They're religious.
very religious. Yes, but then you've got bugbears. Bugbears are very, I want to say, kind of that older primeval worship where they've got
Like traditional.
Neanderthal.
yeah, almost. So they got Rugyek, which is one of two sibling deities. This one is the sibling of might and power, kind of making it that deity, like if you want might and power during combat or something, you kind of like say a quick prayer to Rugyek. But then you've got the sneaky one, the Krankul. He's a little smaller. He's represented a little smaller than his other sibling, and he is also known to be younger, but he's that cunning and that stealth, and that's where bugbears get their stealth from. They kind of like, if they're going on a sneak mission or an ambush or something, they kind of worship this god quickly, and kind of the combination of worshiping these two gods gives them their brute strength and their sneaky.
simplify what goblins are? You've mentioned goblins, hobgoblins, bugbears, a nilbog. What's the difference between everyone?
Size and intelligence, essentially.
Of course.
Less so on the intelligence.
Well, hobgoblins, they average human intelligence, whereas goblins are a little less, and bugbears are just the dumb barbarians.
I would love to see a savant goblin. Just
So
Coming right up.
Very smart, businessy goblin that comes in. He works at Gringotts Bank.
You gotta have that gruff voice, though.
And he-
he's
Yeah,
actually
right.
like overseeing the entire goblin village, and he's got them in order somehow, despite how dumb most of them are.
Well, and it's not really order. It's like the lawyer's order, where it's like, you do this, and I'll hook you up, kind of thing. Like, almost like mob boss. I could see that. Just the bug or the hobgoblin coming, the savant hobgoblin. They're
So-
like, we can do this.
we've kind of narrowed it down. So goblins are the small creatures, the grunts of the group, whereas the brute force is the bugbears, and then we've got hobgoblins as the
Militaristic kind of warriors.
chiefs. And okay.
These three groups, although unified as a race, still live in their own separate
Communities.
communities. Goblins tend to stick to their own little groups, still leading by whoever's strongest or smartest, which may not be another goblin. Sometimes it's another bugbear or a hobgoblin, or even someone smart like a evil wizard, or so on and so forth. Like, goblins are very subservient to power. They're just weak. They're power hungry, though. It's weird.
Which is why they are sometimes listen to bugbears or hobgoblins in certain circumstances.
It's more out of fear, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not. Oh yeah. Oh hell, this leader. No. It's very a fear thing. It's
Like the bugbear came into village, ate 10 of them, and they were like, "Okay, we'll listen to you."
well, and it's funny though, is although they are subservient to these feared leaders, they are not loyal. First opportunity, they are very opportunistic. The first opportunity they see at taking out this leader, they'll take him out and then claim themselves leader.
That's very right.
They're very
Literally attempt to survival of the fittest, but they imagine themselves the fittest.
It's weird too because they're still lazy as well.
Right.
It's still survival of the fittest. They all have their individual casts and jobs and such, but they're still lazy. We've been kind of talking about these creatures, goblins, hobgoblins, and how do you guys depict them in your own individual worlds? How do you describe them? In my world, I have them kind of separated based off of region. Some are under the mountains, they kind of take on darker colors. The very typical is like a yellow or greenish tan color. For mine, the ones under the mountains are dark purples and blues and greens. The ones in the hills are more hairy, kind of like their bugbear brethren.
Oh, I guess that makes sense.
Kind of to take with the cold and survive the winters and so on and so forth. They still have the earthier colors, greens, browns, and reds. Whereas jungles, my jungle goblins or like very foresty goblins are more stereotypical to like what you see in the book. They kind of go a little brighter, I would say, kind of like dart frogs. Poison dart frogs, I mean.
So the grund. Another creature from Vola's Guide.
Yeah, I mean...
They vary from where they're...
Kind of. I wouldn't say that bright. I wouldn't say
Okay.
neon. It's just... instead of a tan color, it's just yellow.
Okay.
It's just green. It's not like a shade of it or anything. It's like you pick a crown from the Crayola box and that's that's what you got. But I mean, mine are, squashed small heads. They've got the almost vampire bat-like nose, the sharp ears, sharp teeth.
Okay.
Long gangly fingers, despite their shorter limbs, and I would say they're like a very twisted halfling. And then I've got hobgoblins. I kind of take after the baboon, and the bright noses instead of the bright butts.
Yeah.
You got bright red or blue noses kind of symbolizes like, oh, that guy's supposed to be royalty. Let's put him in that caste or that position. Let's train him to be a leader, a general, aristocrat, or even a mage.
It's also funny that you say they're like baboons because they're also very, like we said, very militaristic, and they're also very aggressive.
Very aggressive.
They're actually very much like baboons in that case.
Although, despite baboons, they are very honor-bound. Brute of honor, but it's still like, what's
like
that
code of
Japanese...
conduct in battle.
Yeah, like they have... like the Japanese samurai, which they have that honor code much to like the samurai. Like only the leaders are allowed to wield sword, or the samurai are allowed to wield swords. While these leaders are trained and they stick to that position. You know, you don't get the nobleman trying to be a king or so, or you're not trying to get the commoners to be the samurai. Well, in this same sense, you know, you are in this position, you stay in this position. If you try to take out this position or go leave your position, you have broken the honor, you've broken the code, and you will die for it.
Right. I've also related them to Vikings because they like to die in war. Like, they wish to die in war and be added to the army of Maglubiet. There is a reference to a different plane that they go to. The forces of Maglubiet are just waiting to relinquish.
Afterwards, when you die in their culture, the idea is you join Maglubiet's army,
right,
and you fight for him, which for hobgoblins, you know, that's like Valhalla. That's like perfection. That is what you aim for.
Yeah, I can see that.
Kind of, not exactly. I mean, sure, but at the same time,
forced into Maglubiet's armor, but they, and that's kind of going back to the deities. They don't worship Maglubiet like the other two do. Bugbears they like their gods, and although they will follow Maglubiet's, you know, worshippers and say like, okay, yeah, we'll do it, they don't really follow Maglubiet in a religious sense.
Wonder what they fight. Other gods.
Celestials?
So, as I said, the idea is that they come back to, they either go back to the prime material plane or they go to other planes and they just conquer. And that's, I mean...
Just conquer what they can.
Essentially, yeah.
Oh, God. So, could be in a long run bad idea to kill a goblinkin, or a hobgoblin specifically, if that's going to happen.
There are so many. I mean, you take a bunch of, an army of goblins, you throw them up against a bunch of celestials, it'll be just like the first adventure, slaying a whole group of goblins. It'll be super simple. It's just their sheer amount of numbers that make them a problem. Bugbears, as I said, or as we said earlier, they're that really tall, lengthy, hairy creature. You know, they've kind of got that Neanderthal look to them, I would say.
Yeah, they're very apish-like, and they have like really long arms, so they can reach out. They have the very coarse sort of like fur all over their body, hence the bear aspect. It's very bear-like fur. They have like this strength and this power, so they can be like very physical, but then at the same time, they also can be really quiet and really stealthy.
Bugbears do not strike stealthy to me, just personally, just to their size.
They are huge. I mean, bugbears can go from anywhere like 6 to 8 feet. They're huge, and they've got these long limbs, and I want to say it's their furriness, kind of like a tiger's stripes or like a cat's fur, kind of blends them into
rather than being quiet.
It's not really being quiet. It's more of like sitting and waiting. Kind of ambush. It's not. It's not like a thief's sneak. You know, it's not like a thief's, you know, quiet steps and everything. It's more of sitting still, getting ahead of where you know your enemy's going to be, sitting and just waiting, and you wait and wait, which is good for bugbears because they're kind of that lazy when they're not fighting. They make goblins look like very active on how lazy they're. So lazy.
The bugbear, do they have a longer reach as far as tactics?
Mechanically,
yeah.
Yeah, they have. As far as volos, they have long limbs. Is that the name of the?
Yeah, long-limbed. So essentially, how it works is they, on their turn, when they're using a weapon, they can utilize their longer arms to make attacks mechanically 5 feet longer than the normal range of the weapon. So, say for example, you have a sword, instead of just hitting something directly next to you, you can go a little further. If you have a pole arm,
I was gonna have on better with the
a
pole
reach
arm.
of 10 feet,
Right.
you can actually extend it out to 15.
15, yeah.
Throw in Battlemaster lunge attack, and you've got a full
25 feet.
With the command-
which basically just equates to you holding your arm out with the pole arm, like, off
and
from
leaning
you.
a little bit too.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered those three. You mentioned another one, a Nilbog. How does that come to be?
The Overseer, the trickster for the goblins, Kurgor Bayag, after being conquered by Maglubiet, he was still kind of that insubordinate kind of deity, and to kind of counteract, to keep his spirit out there, he created Nilbogs, which are, if you think about it, they're a piece of him. And they are the exact opposite of goblins. It's even in the name. Nilbog spelled backwards is goblin. And they are possessive, obviously, because they possess these goblins.
Okay.
And they convert these goblins into jesters and pranksters, and they're very fearless. Whereas goblins are, subservient and ruled by fear. Well, Nilbogs are the exact opposite. They serve no one but themselves, and they have no fear. Basically,
Can goblins end up serving Nilbogs if Nilbogs end up like using their magic, which they can possess?
Yeah, well, Nilbogs are more what happens if you bully a goblin too much.
Right.
If you've got like a goblin group and a bugbear group, and the bugbear came over and took over the goblin, and they have this one particular goblin, maybe has a defect or something, and they just don't like it. And they pick on it and pick on it and pick on it. With all of that, essentially, or it becomes a Nilbog in sense. Its own spirit, its own essence becomes that of a Nilbog.
Right.
And then trying to hit a Nilbog, basically, I mean, as far as mechanics go, it reduces hit points taken to 0, and it deals damage back to those who hit it.
Right, which brings up the question is like, if it becomes such an untouchable or oddly powerful little creature, would eventually it take hold of leadership of goblins, whether it's with those bugbears or not?
Oh, you mean like to take over as a boss?
Yeah.
I would say, at least the way that I've depicted them, no, because they're more of that individual like myself. I am me. I do what I want. I don't care about you.
That's a fair point.
And that's also, they don't, like, their abilities and, like, what they do, it doesn't really support that either. Like, they're very much about, like, causing mayhem and creating problems, and, like, what you were saying, like, basically just leading, like, a very hedonistic lifestyle. So they do what's best for them, what they enjoy most. So the most that I think goblins, at least in the sense of, like, worshipping Nilbogs, or, like, recognizing it as a power, is they kind of use it as, like, a card up their sleeve to kind of be like, hey, you shouldn't mess with us this much because, one of us could become, like, a prankster and just ruin your day completely.
Well, and that's where you get, I believe they're called hosts, where you've got, like, the hobgoblins have, they're building their army and everything. They always allow that one goblin to do whatever they want so that they can't become this Nilbog. So, essentially, you have a goblin that's being a trickster, and it may not be a Nilbog, but it gets free reign, why not,
Right.
It doesn't get picked on, it doesn't get punished, and it's all for fear of it becoming this Nilbog. It's I would never allow it as a PC, by the way. Just throwing that out there. They are so crazy. Like, they take chaotic neutral or chaotic evil and just throw that out the window and do even worse.
Yeah, but is it possible, and I think I've seen it a couple times, to where that goblins or goblinkin generally have magic, or how common and well used is that in goblin society?
They can. It doesn't happen that often, but there are situations where goblins do find a magic item or something, and more so through chance and luck, they figure how to use it. And then to the rest of the goblins, they are now suddenly very cool. There's a goblin word for magic that is booyak, which basically just essentially is their word for magic. And they don't understand what it is, they don't know how it works, but to them, it's the coolest thing ever.
God, I don't
Say,
wanna
for
see
example, you get a goblin that finds, like, a necklace, and little does he know it creates fire by throwing beads. And
Although
he may burn half of his village down in the process, but now he is
he's
the
like a
cool
god of
goblin.
fire.
And even sometimes they get, like, servants that follow after them. If you're lucky, a goblin can read. Maybe he finds a spell book from a wizard, and he uses his average intelligence to maybe learn a spell or two.
Have you used any goblins in your campaign?
I have, yeah. I've used goblins before, which, like we mentioned earlier, they're very good for early on. You can put them against lower level characters like level 1, level 2.
Okay.
And they're very good like introductions because they're not that strong. Like we said earlier, they're not that smart. They're smart enough to know how to use like traps and like some tactics. They know how to like set up ambushes and things, which I've used before as well. And they can take advantage of situations using their superior numbers a lot of the time. Bugbears and hobgoblins I have not at the moment used. I have plans to use them in the future. But essentially, kind of like what I said earlier, for me at least, hobgoblins, they're very much like, they are a military. Like, I almost imagine them the kind of like mercenaries or like their own individual like troop kind of going around for the sake of combat and conquering, not necessarily like to serve someone. So definitely they could go around and create problems in the world. And then bugbears, kind of just more like thuggish brutes that if you run into on their own, they'll use it for that purpose, or they'll move in small groups, or they're subservient to a group such as, say, a group of hobgoblins, and they have some bugbears as shock troops.
Well, I was to say, they're not really subservient per se. It's more like they've been bribed or paid. You know, we'll give you all of your food and we'll let you be lazy as long as you provide, you know, be shock troops for us. Or, you know, it's not really a subservient race. They're very battle hungry, and I mean, there's been instances where bugbears have fought against hobgoblins because of this.
Okay.
Hobgoblins have tried to take over, and this isn't seen by the players. This is kind of background as the world moves on, kind of thing. And kind of going along with that, they are not subservient. It's more of getting paid. They're, I want to say, mercenaries almost. They're like stealthy mercenaries.
Army of mercenaries.
It's been done.
Well, that's what it seems like. If that was the case for goblins, it's just the next big payer or big wealth giver to the goblins gets a whole army to send wherever.
Yeah.
So you were mentioning nilbogs, and you've had a certain. All of us have been present with a certain nilbog.
Beboop. That wasn't named by me. That was named by
Dan.
Dan, yeah.
That was named by me because I thought he was a precious little goblin, and I wanted us to keep him. And I got attached, and I said we should name him. And the first thing I could come up with was Beboop.
So this was not your ordinary nilbog. Essentially, what had happened is a kobold had stolen a necklace of disguise, and I have in my campaign a war kind of going on where Goblinkin and Dragonkin are kind of working together to assault this human kingdom. And because of like the hierarchy and everything, and of goblins and whatnot, the kobolds are kind of treated very poorly. And so this one kind of wanted to get out of that, get out from, you know, sitting at a war camp and waiting and building and so on and so forth. He stole the necklace from a booyog, put it on himself, and transformed into said booyog, almost doppelganger-like. And he started following. He went out with this hunting party, this goblin shock troop, and within this raid, the players came across what remains of a double cross almost. Within this shock troop it wasn't just Beboop and a bunch of goblins. There were other things called Bards, which are essentially fiends created by a deity that felt wronged by Maglubiet. And Maglubiet was betrayed, he betrayed his word. And so these things were created to essentially eat goblin souls. One for every misdeed, so 14 in total. Each one is expected to take before returning back home, and then providing it for its own war. Anyway, so the players finished off the Barghest and had 3 goblins left, and they started interrogating these goblins. They killed one, and then they had 2 more, and I don't remember what exactly happened to the second goblin, but Beboop was left alive, and they took him as prisoner, assuming he would have information on the war. And later found out that after him getting out of his bindings and everything, that he was a kobold, and this spirit that came after you slay a Barghest. A spirit comes. All the spirits consumed by the Barghest are released after a certain amount of time, so forth. And one of the spirits went into Beboop, and that's how he created a Nilbog. But it turns out he was a kobold, so I'm kind of running on a rant here. Anyways, so what I did is I took the Nilbog spirit, and it possessed a kobold instead, kind of thinking that it has its own. The spirit has its own mind, and it took over the kobold. It created what I deemed a Lobok, which is kobold backwards, and kind of had that same reverse personality. So kobolds being kind of going a little off topic with the Goblin King, kobolds are diggers and so forth, diggers, trappers, and so forth. Well, I made this one the exact opposite of a kobold. So he's lazy, he doesn't do much, he kind of still takes that prankster personality from the Nilbog. So I played him really annoying. Like, he was...
That's a good way to put it.
He was fun, but annoying. They kept trying to tie him up, but he kept using his mage hand to untie the bonds.
He was definitely a curious creature.
Very curious.
Was it mage hand the whole time?
It was mage hand the whole time.
Oh, jeez.
He kept untying himself, or he kept... Nilbogs in general have limited magics. And I think his favorite thing is like your character Jake, Salitho. He's like, I am so going to kill this. And every time, you can certainly try.
The amount of times to where he got himself into something stupid or stole or decided to do something.
I kind of gave him that curious of a cat kind of personality too.
Especially, that's how he died.
Yes, it is. So, Nilbogs, hard to hit. If a creature attacks it, whether it be with a spell or with a melee attack, it essentially has a reaction where it can reduce the damage to 0 and heal that much. Granted, they only have like 6 or 7 hit points on average. This one was with his curiosity, because it was a Nilbog in a kobold's body, so it had this curiosity about its new body and its surroundings and seeing things from a different perspective. The players indirectly convinced him to walk into a trap, which was essentially just a beam of fire, and even talking mechanically, even saving on the saving throw, still had enough hit points to kill him outright. And so the trap went off, and there was nothing. There was no kobold. Beboop was just gone. All they saw was a little spirit go up into the wall and then just disappear.
How about PCs? Has anyone done any PC goblins? I know Volo's guide provides stats for that.
I know one very specific PC that took place, which...
Oh, I wonder who
Yes.
it is.
That would be
Mr. Bringer
Baga
of
Baga.
Knowledge.
Baga. You guys have met a couple.
Yeah, we have. So Baga Baga was a death cleric
For a one-shot, I read.
for a one shot that Daniel ran, and it was glorious. She just wanted to die all the time, and it's every time she went down, they brought her back, and she was mildly annoyed about that. Actually, furiously annoyed about that.
I'd like to
Retirement.
add, this was before Volos, where there was an official like goblin
Right.
build. I kind of went to a couple other sites, E-Bomb's World. I went to the back of the DMG, kind of using that NPC racial table, and I kind of mix matched websites and the DMG to make this glorious character, as you put it.
Yeah. So, if you were to play a PC, what kind of backgrounds or what kind of classes would you guys specifically put them in? We've talked about stealthy types. We've talked about barbaric types.
Clearly, every single goblin should be a wizard at one point in their life, at least once.
At least
That
three levels.
low intelligent wizard.
Well, it would be funny. I kind of feel like going into the thief background is kind of a misplay, because at least with Volo's Guide for 5th edition, they already get that ability to disengage or dash or hide as a bonus action. Actually, I don't think they can disengage as a bonus, but they already get that, and so you kind of take away from the thieving ability, the cunning action
Okay.
for thieves. So kind of combining the two, you have to be willing to give up either the racial, or I would say the racial, because the cunning action kind of gives you a little bit more. Because it's disengage or hide for goblins, now that I'm thinking about it. A great, at least for goblins, going straight into goblins background, it would be the Ranger Beastmaster, although it's a little underplayed and opinions will vary. Beastmaster, because of kind of their original background, they have, so between goblins and hobgoblins, they like to enslave creatures, whether it be, you know, training them for mounts or training them as subservient slaves for war. You know,
What kind of creatures would they capture?
mostly beasts. Goblins kind of train, you know, medium to slightly larger creatures as mounts,
Like
just for
wolves and stuff like that.
wolves. And then there's one more.
Warg.
Is a warg, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of goblinoid facial featured wolves, you know, and they're highly intelligent. They can talk with goblins. Wargs are kind of contracted, much like hobgoblins. You have to talk to them. You agree on what you want and how you can serve them and how they can serve you. Come to that agreement and they work for you, or work with you rather. But hobgoblins, I mean, they'll go as far as slaving their own enemies and using them as cannon fodder or meat fodder for armies. You know, we just conquered this spy group that was trying to spy on us before this war. Well, now we're going to use them after beating the will out of them and use them as frontline soldiers against their own allies.
Wow.
I just have to question really quick. Are you serious with this note? Hydra?
Yeah, so there was an example in Volo's Guide that that because of their slaver Beastmaster, they will take creatures way out of their range. They'll use their advantage in numbers and for like Hobgoblin's power. And they'll do something as crazy as making goblins ride the Hydra heads and using essentially blinders to guide the Hydra in the direction it wants.
That's both equally terrifying and strange.
Yeah, just cut off a head and it loses its mount. But then you have two more heads to worry about.
And just two more goblins just hop right on. Like, let's go!
Another one I thought was pretty interesting, was a carrion crawler. You know,
Underdark.
kind of
Bug-like
building into
creatures.
that laziness. Like, I don't want to walk, you know, the 30 miles it takes to get back to camp. Let's just conquer this carrion crawler, put a piece of rotting meat out like you would with Fido and his dog bone, and just have him lead you back and ride on. You just got a single file line. You come across a creature, well, it's got, you know, its own attacks and everything, and
Pretty much like a very creepy eating train.
yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
But going back into what we were originally talking about, backgrounds or classes, I would definitely say goblins would be great for the ranger class. You know, getting that slight ability from, you know, cunning action with their own racial ability. So then they get that racial ability. Then they're already naturally small and and stealthy, much like halflings. And then they're just vicious. They are just vicious. Like, I could see them being a hunter even, and just instead of enslaving creatures, attacking creatures and just loving it. Even go as far as bugbears to say as a hunter. You know, that battle lust as well. Yeah, most people would associate them with barbarians, I would say.
Yeah.
That's true. You get the sneaky barbarians going on.
I think that's more terrifying than a hunter. I mean, you could still say they hunt. It's just a natural thing that they would do.
Yeah. So more of an outlander then for a bug. What about you? What would you do?
Well, ranger or rogues. I mean, we've discussed how stealthy they are. I personally ran goblins against parties, and they've hidden and shot arrows from the distance, and been very stealthy. So,
well, how would you run like a hobgoblin? They've kind of got that humanoid intelligence.
I would run them as a battle master of sorts, a fighter. Definitely know the tactics, how to command a group of goblins.
What about like a paladin of conquest?
I was going to say the same
Paladin
thing.
Conquest. That's right.
From the new
the
UA
Unearthed Arcana has, because they're very religious.
Right.
background of like soldiers. So
Sure. Yeah.
Or War Domain Cleric in that case as well.
Yeah.
Oh
very
yeah.
worshipping of combat.
Yeah.
One of the other ones I really like for hobgoblins is the idea of being a wizard, so basically like a battle mage kind of thing.
You were ready for these wizard
I-
goblins,
I
aren't you?
was I'm so ready for a hobgoblin wizard.
I wanted to do a hobgoblin, though. The more I think
As a
about
player?
it, as a player,
Really?
just personally, I like what they are,
Yeah.
and how they are portrayed. I wouldn't mind being a hobgoblin one of these
I like
days.
doing against the tropes. A bugbear sorcerer, I think would be freaking hilarious.
Wow.
It'd be even worse with more wild magic.
Oh, wild magic.
Yeah.
Sorcerer, yeah.
Straight up
definitely.
wild magic. He's brutal.
Yeah.
He's got reach, so it's
And
hard for creatures to get
Silly
in
turns
range.
into a plant.
Another idea of like just sort of like offset, like not something you would typically think of. I would like to have a goblin bard because that just seems funny.
Satire.
What kind of bard? Yeah.
Satire,
Probably
straight up.
Satire.
Basically,
Okay.
like you're like a player version of a Nilbog.
Essentially,
Yeah, that would
it gives
exactly
you that chance
be-
to just kind of play off of that idea. Very performy, very chaotic,
Jester-like,
causing a
yeah.
lot of problems. Very jester-like, yeah. So it'd work really well.
That would I would not mind seeing someone run a jester.
So got it. We've got a goblin band of PCs. Next campaign.
We're gonna have a goblin bard, a hobgoblin paladin, and a bugbear fighter.
No.
And a rogue. Yeah.
I also like the idea of a bugbear rogue, just for the fact that
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
also using their stealth.
Yeah.
You have that added surprise attack, so
That's true.
especially if you're an assassin rogue, you get that advantage of just all this extra damage just for sneaking up on somebody.
100 damage on
Exactly.
the first attack.
It's
Yeah.
just all this extra damage you can put in, and it would be early on too.
Let the
So
dice
it gives
roll.
you an edge. Exactly, let the dice roll. Grab all your dice on the table and roll. All of them.
Everything.
You know what?
That's your damage.
Just roll all your dice that you have.
Just you know what? You killed him. He's dead.
Yeah.
It's over.
Just
Done.
Don't worry.
You literally just
Mission
poked him in the
complete.
butt.
You
and
slayed the
down.
dragon in 2 attacks.
Thank you for staying at the Bardic Inn. If you would like to hear more, we will be uploading new content Thursdays at noon PST on
iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Castbox, and Podbean.
If you have any recommendations on future content, you can leave a comment on these various platforms, or you can contact us on Twitter at the Bardic Inn, or on Facebook at facebook.com/Bardic Inn.
We're your local bards.
Daniel.
Andrew.
Dave,
And Jake.
be inspired.